welcome back to another video by Destroyer of Deception. Immediately, you guys, I need you guys to go and subscribe and turn on your notifications right now. As I go out throughout this video, definitely tell me if you like it. Leave comments below wherever you can about questions that you may have in regards to the video that I'm about to talk about, and tell me if you like it or not. But today's topic is going to be about: are all sins equal? Are all sins equal? I'm doing a reaction video actually to one of the guys that I kind of follow. I follow in regards to it's definitely very educational, and many different people have many different opinions about certain things and so forth. And some people will use Bible verses to back up their point, and some just talk. And whichever way that happens, I prefer you back up what you're saying. Don't just talk to me. Back up what you're saying, and prove it to the people. So the people have legit evidence to say, hey, I could go here and look at, okay, this is why he's saying what he's saying. For those that do just talk and they don't really use Bible verses and so forth, that's fine as well. All I know is, from my perspective, as I've did a lot of research, did a lot of reading of the Bible, front to back, front to back, front to back, back to front, that with that understanding, I know a lot of things. Not to boast myself or be proudful in things and so forth. So as you talk, I can tell or begin to say where, I can relate to where the words say this or the words say that. And if it don't say this or don't say that, if we're twisting things a little bit, I think that I have a good understanding to know when that's happening. And so there will be many videos like that. There will be some videos I will agree with. This particular video, I'm not going to spill the beans whether I agree or not, but as I go along, you're going to begin to see what I do agree on or I don't agree on. Anyway, the topic is, are all sins equal? Are all sins equal? And so as I do this reaction video, I want you guys to partake and learn and listen, and let's grow together as we begin to change this world. All righty, y'all ready? Here we go.
That all sins are equal before God.
All right, let's stop right there. He said, are all sins equal before God? Are all sins equal before God? It's a great question. So I'm here to tell you that to answer the question properly, it's a yes and no. Are all sins equal? It's yes and no. Now, in this particular situation, this individual is asking a question to Pastor John saying, it just don't seem right for all sins to be equal. Well, like I just answered, I just told you, yes, all sins are equal, but then no, all sins are not equal. There's two things that we have to identify and speak towards to answer this question properly. As I proceed throughout the video, I'm going to let you guys know what that is. People have passed down teachings and so forth from time past, based upon their limited thinking, their limited knowledge, their lack of understanding, their lack of knowledge, which is the ignorancy, is the definition of ignorant. The lack of knowledge is the definition of ignorant. You just don't have the proper knowledge, and therefore, when you read certain passages in the scriptures, you can begin to communicate and say, based on a verse, oh, this right here, see, all sin is equal, nothing is one more than the other, therefore if you want sin, all sin. And that verse is more so used to justify why you should not keep the law. Now, to go ahead and give you a heads up, that's a very controversial subject, whether or not we should keep the law or not. You guys are going to know moving forward after this day. I have told you on this video here that we all are to keep the law. hands down. No one can say we can't, and so forth. And that's all of it. There's not one part you can keep and one part done away with. There's not anything you can think of that the Lord has said we must do. It's a part of His instructions. That is the law, His instruction, His commandments, and so forth. You're gonna learn a lot, like I say. But they use that verse or passages of scripture to justify why they don't have to keep the law, so they can continue to do what they want to do, what their soul desire, and not what the Lord desire. To walk in His ways. Not to be long-winded. Back to the subject. Are all sins equal before God? Great question. He doesn't agree. I don't agree either. All sins are not equal before God. And it's going to be clear as we go on throughout this video. Let's continue. This is Pastor John, by the way. As you guys can see in the red writing.
What would you say? I have heard that too. And the reason people have said that is because of James, and I'm going to forget the location, but it says, if you have committed one sin, you're guilty of all.
Again, if I stop right there, again, that's the area of scriptures where people use to justify why they should not keep the law, why they can be exempt from certain things in the law. All right, I'm not gonna belabor that. I'm gonna keep going.
That's James 3 or 4. If you've committed one sin, you're guilty of all, which seems to mean that small sin, big sin, I'm totally guilty of all the commandments, and therefore every sin is equally damning to me. That's not the whole story, is it?
Right. It can't be the whole story. And like I say, he's gonna give great examples. Let's keep going.
First, not everybody is hurt in the same way by every sin. In other words, if I shoot Michael dead right now, or if I just spit on him, both are very ugly sins, and Jesus calls hatred murder. But he's not dead if I spit on him. So worse.
So real quick, I do like the example. I like to give a little twist to it. So he used the example, like he said, of one spitting on an individual versus somebody getting shot. With that being said, clearly we know that being shot is, you should clearly begin to see that being shot is way worse than, you got somebody spit on you and so forth. So he used the example saying, Yeshua, Jesus Christ for the English language, Jesus for the English language, has stated that hatred is abominable. When the Lord Yeshua, Jesus Christ, stated that hatred is abominable, hatred is one of those great sins that leads up to, he was just explaining that it leads up to killing. So if you hate someone, even in your heart, it's just as worse as you going ahead and killing an individual. Because why? It's going to fester. It's going to fester into something more greater than where it needs to be. And so if you have hatred for no reason, or even if you did have a reason and so forth, it can begin to, if you don't figure out a way to control that, it's going to fester to a place where you don't want it to be. You're going to fester to a place where it could be damaging, detrimental to not even for your natural earthly things, but to your heavenly situations and so forth. So, and I hope I wasn't trying to downplay what Yeshua said, and I definitely wasn't downplaying it. I was showing the mindset of what Yeshua was saying, and therefore he wasn't agreeing that all sin was equal, that one thing is better than another, or the little bitty sin such as spitting on the individual is worse than the killing, or on the same level as killing. He was just saying, beginning to say that, hey, hatred in your heart is the beginning. If you have this type of hatred in your heart, therefore it's going to fester into something that is not needed. And if you hate an individual, that's not loving your neighbor. All the instructions of the Lord is to love your neighbor. We're going to get into that a lot throughout DOD, Destroyer of Deception videos. We're going to get into a lot of that to show that, hey, hatred is the opposite of loving your neighbor. Hatred towards the Lord is the opposite of loving the Lord with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind. Therefore, if you have hatred, you're going to break the commandments. You're going to fall into sin, and that is falling into sin. You're not loving your neighbor. This is the requirement that the Lord has for all people, and so forth. Anger is different from hatred, and so forth. You can be angry, at your kids. You could be angry at your sister, your brother, your family members, or friends and work bosses and peers and employees and so forth. But it's a difference when you begin to hate them and have a ill will towards them. Not to belabor, let's get back to the point. I believe you guys understand what is being said. Let's go.
So sin, meaning worse in its effect, would be killing is worse than spitting. I think we should say that. It is. And because consequences matter for you. And I think for me, because here's another text you have to bring in. Jesus taught that there would be degrees of punishment. If you know the right and don't do it, you'll be beaten with more stripes than if you don't know the right and do wrong. So there's degrees of punishment, which must mean degrees of guiltiness, which must mean that some sins are more blameworthy than others.
All right, let's stop right there. Oh, absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. That's a great example that he used of the stripes. One will receive more stripes than the other, and so forth. But the other example is also in Matthew chapter 5, I think around verse 17, 18, 19 area time frame, where the Lord communicated that that the least, he stated about the greatest and the least in the kingdom, establishing and showing that, hey, that there is a level of hierarchy in the kingdom of God, that the least in the kingdom will be greater than John the Baptist, which was said in another place in the Gospels and so forth. And so if the least is greater than John the Baptist, and the Lord Yeshua called John the Baptist the greatest prophet that ever lived on the face of the earth, and we know in his kingdom the least in the kingdom is greater than him, you can imagine the greatness of the people. There's hierarchy. There's hierarchy and so forth that's there. And like I say, in the future messages, we'll talk about Matthew chapter 5, verse 17 through 19 on a deeper level. But without going deeper into detail, I just want to point out that little bit of understanding to agree with what Pastor John is saying in regards to the differences in punishment, the differences in awards, or rewards, the differences in statuses and so forth. And for all you people that's out there that you worried about status, that's not really true. It's absolutely true, and you can't deny it. Like I say, I will test me and see. I'll point out every scriptures and show you that he says this over and over and over again about the establishment of the hierarchy of the governance of his kingdom to come. There's too many scriptures to deny and so forth. And like I say, the blatant ones is right there in Matthew chapter 5, like I say, verse 17 through 18, that those who teach that don't teach the commandments correctly will be the least in the kingdom, versus those that do teach the commandments will be greater in the kingdom of heaven. And therefore, establishing the stripes of the punishments, that there'll be different levels of punishments. And in 1 Corinthians, it also talks about the rewards that you get, the jewels and rubies that you can build up while you're on this earth, that you, as you build upon the foundation, you also build wood, hay, and stubble, and therefore signifying that that's the bad in your life versus the rubies and jewels and so forth. It's the good that you have done in your life. The Lord said at judgment, I set everything on fire. I set everything on fire. And therefore, when everything is on fire and so forth, you're going to be left with what you're blessed with. And for some people, they ain't going to have nothing, but they'll make it in. Those will be the least in the kingdom, who will be greater than John the Baptist. But for those who are able to obtain a ruby or jewel and so forth, will therefore receive a reward, a greater status, greater, and however the Lord sets it up to be. All right, and let's continue right now.
Let me go back to James and just say what I think is meant there. The argument is, the reason if you do this sin, you're guilty of all, is because one God said all. And therefore, what he's drawing attention to is, if I say to God, I'm going to do this against you, the small sin, spit on somebody, and I'm going to do this big sin against you. In both cases, you've defied God. In both cases, you've said no to God. That's what he's saying. He wants us to feel that every sin, from the smallest to the greatest, is against God, not just against people.
And I'd like to add a better, I hope it's a better explanation of what James is saying when he said all sin is guilty before the Lord. You're guilty of all sin. If you commit one sin, you're guilty of all sin. And so what James is saying is that our Heavenly Father is so holy, so mighty, so powerful, and holy and righteous, that if you could do one sin, you're guilty of everything. You are worthy of death. Let's take it back to Adam and Eve. Great example. The Lord gave them one commandment, just one. Don't eat from the tree. Which tree? The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Don't eat it. That was the only commandment. When you broke the one, you was worthy of death. There's nothing else you can do. You can do all good after that. You are worthy of death and you shall die. This is what James is saying as well. James is saying the exact same thing. That if you commit sin once, you have committed every sin. Not that you have literally committed every sin, but you have disobeyed God in all fashions. It's all treated as the same. Therefore, you are worthy of death. Surely Adam didn't commit such a sin as killing anybody and so forth. But because of his sin of eating the fruit, caused death to enter into the world. Therefore, the same sense, James is saying the same thing. All is worthy to die. One sin versus many sins, or one small lie versus a huge, big, you murder a serial killer, you were murdering everybody you came across and you seen, and so forth. They are the same and worthy of death. And therefore, that's what James was saying. And I hope that helped clarify exactly what Pastor John is saying in this video. Let's keep going.
And their consequences. And in that sense, every sin is infinitely heinous. So you just have to carve this up and say, when it comes to God being defamed in my heart, I am committing an infinite evil against him if I do a small sin or a big sin. But there are other factors that have to be brought in.
All righty, guys, that was the end of the video. To just say one last time as we wrap this thing up, we clearly see that the question was, remember, are all sins equal before the Lord? clearly all sins are not equal before the Lord. There's two types of things that we need to see here. In regards to the Lord, if you sin one type of sin, you're worthy of death. We understand this from the time of Adam and Eve, from the time of their fall. All death passed to all men, therefore we all are under sin. Therefore, you sin once, you're worthy to die. That's what James was saying. The other factor to begin to help answer the question, are all sins equal before the Lord, is clear throughout when you read the commandments, instructions that the Lord has given to us throughout his word to show that, hey, one sin deserves a greater punishment than another, versus killing, versus stealing, versus just not willing to help out your neighbor. You know, all those are different levels of sins, which requires different levels of punishment. And all those punishments are given out in their respective ways throughout the scriptures and so forth. And so it's clearly is not equal. They are all different and so forth. And we know this by the word that we see in the scriptures. All righty. I hope you guys enjoyed this tremendously. Anyway, tell me what you like. Like the video. Just comment below. Tell me what you thought about the video, your suggestions, any questions that you may have. Put them in the comments below as well. For those that require more explanation, I'll try my best to do a video. And if I think that something still needs to be explained to all people, I will do that as well. So forth. But don't forget to subscribe as well. Alrighty. Thank you guys. Destroy Deception, DOD, and I'm out.